on our website. So if there's anyone who has a problem, tell us now and we won't record.
Okay, yes, started.
Okay, so I would like to welcome all of you to this meeting of our Poland Forum, which our dear Dr. Leah Ganor is our senior scholar and our coordinator and does such a wonderful job and is so enthusiastic that every time I hear from her about another person that's joining and a new initiative, I know that she is the perfect person to run our Poland Forum, and I'm very proud of everything that she does. And I'm very pleased to have all of you here today and looking forward tremendously to hear our dear member Ruth speak about her research and tell us all about testimonies and getting them. And then we'll have time at the end, I'm sure, for questions and answers. I'm not going to take away time. You didn't come to hear me, you came to hear Ruth. So I greet all of you. I welcome all of you. I wish us all good health and good listening to this lecture.
Thank you very much, Judy. I would like to introduce Ruth Geall is a member of Poland Forum, an independent researcher. She spent over 40 years working in social care policy, planning and management in UK local government and disability charities. On retirement, she became involved in working on oral history projects and is now researching and uncovering the histories and personal stories of people in the town of Silesia, where her father grew up. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Okay, can I ask everyone to mute? Because I know last time it was difficult if people don't mute. And I'm going to now try to share my screen with you. Okay, can you see my screen? Yeah, and you hear me as well? Okay, I think we're ready to go then. So hello, my name is Ruth Geall, and I want to tell you about the history that I think you may be less familiar with. It's the story of a town of Dzierżoniów in Poland, which was called Reichenbach before the war. The town in Poland had a post-war Jewish population of thousands times larger than its Jewish population before the war. And in that sense, I think it's quite unique. I wanted to just first tell you about my journey to the town and to this research project. I live in London. My parents are both Jewish. My mother, you can hear my accent. I live in London, but I was born in the United States. My mother was born in the US of Polish Jewish descent. Her family emigrated before 1900, but my father was a German Jewish refugee. But all I knew about his life, where he came from, was that he lived in a town called Reichenbach, and they owned a textile mill, and that it had been in Germany before the war and was in Poland after the war. But I didn't know where it was, what its name was, or really anything about Polish history. I then got an email from a stranger who's with us today, Bezalel Levi, who was writing a Jewish history of the town, and he was hoping that I could help him. What I want to do is tell you a little bit about what is fascinating to me about the town, and that will come out a bit more, which is I think what is not known about its history. I knew nothing about its history, about the 20th century of industry, migration, multiculturalism, and political change. So at some point, Bezalel emailed me, and he told me he was born in the town. And I was very surprised. I thought he can't be born before the war, but surely Bezalel is a Jewish name. I didn't know, when you get an email, you don't know where someone comes from, but I assumed it was Israel. And he told me that he was born there post-war period. And I began to read a bit about Polish history and realized how little I understood about the changes that had happened in Poland since the war. And he invited me to visit a celebration at the synagogue there. The synagogue in Dzierżoniów is one of only 3 synagogues that survived the war, and that was part of his questions to me. And after I looked at my history and my father's history in the town, he said to me, I'm going to show you mine. And he took me on a journey. Before the war, the largest number of Jews ever in the town was 150. And by the 1930s, there were only 50. But in 1946, there were 17,500 Jews in Jejonov. There were Jewish schools, there was a Jewish papers, there was Jewish theater, and it was called the Polish Jerusalem. I had been working on oral histories in London, and when I heard this story, not just of the Jews in Poland, but of all of the different groups that migrated there, Poles after the war, Germans who had to leave, and I discovered other people who were also there, I realized this would be a fantastic oral history project because all of those stories are ones that are not covered. So, yeah, and wait a minute, okay. I'm hearing my voice twice, I think. In London, I had been recording local histories, and I dreamed of a project recording a range. I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself twice. Can someone turn off their, somebody has their, hello? Yeah, okay, that's all right now. And I dreamed of a project recording all of these different waves, some of which were people, of course, who survived the Holocaust, but many were people who were deported or had refugee experiences that were very different. But I'm only English speaking, so I thought it was just a dream. I couldn't do it. But I thought, well, I'll start with looking at those people who came before the war, like my father, if I could find any, who were English speaking. And Bezalel helped me. He found me a few, and I started to record their stories. And I went to the British Jewish Genealogical Society, and I asked if they had any records of any Jews who had lived in Jejonov. And they insisted there were no Polish Jews in Poland after the war. There simply weren't any. They didn't know of any. So I sort of gave up there, but I also then realized how much people didn't know about what was going on. And then I had a lucky break. I found out that some town councillors from Jejonov were coming to a city twinning project in the UK. And I begged, you have no idea, I called every day for 2 weeks, the man organizing the tour, that I could have an hour to tell them about what I wanted to do and to tell them a little bit about the history. And the mayor was there and a couple of other town councillors and an interpreter. And I told them about the textile industry before the war, which is very much in the British model. So this was a major industrial revolution in the town. And they looked they didn't know anything about it. They clearly didn't know about it, nor did they know there were any Jews there before the war. And at first, when I was talking, they didn't think I was talking about the pre-war situation. So it was a very lucky situation. They invited me to come to the town and develop the project. I suggested the project. The teacher who was the interpreter for them said, could our students do interviews? And I said, oh yes, of course, no problem, which isn't quite true, but is what I said. And they invited me to the town. They actually paid for room and board, and they took us around. I took with me a German friend who was both an oral historian and she's a photographer, and her father comes from Silesia, from Upper Silesia. And the two of us went on this journey. And I think what the mayor said to us was, he said, I really want you to do this research because we, the Poles who live here, who came here to begin with, come from Lithuania, Latvia, the Ukraine, Russia, and we have lost our history. Our graveyards are gone, our important sites are gone, and we don't want that to happen to people who lived in Jejonov. And we also want to know the history of Jejonov. We want that history back. So that was a really important development. So just to go through the different groups that lived there, we've done about 50 interviews, 5 pre-war German Jews, 4 from the concentration camp, 11 Germans who left in 45, 19 Israelis, US, and Scandinavians who were post-war Jews. We're still in the process of interviewing Polish people. We don't have enough of those yet. And we have 4 who were refugees from the Greek Civil War, and a number of people who were involved in the Solidarity movement and had to leave Poland because of communism. So actually, Leah asked me before how many are Jewish. It's actually more than half, because I forgot about the ones in the camps. So I just wanted first to lay out for you exactly where we are in Poland. You can see the area in gray, which is the area that Poland lost after the Second World War. And you can see the area in pink, which is the area they gained. And the arrow shows you next to Wrocław where Dziedzona is roughly. So, of course, this is the area that had been in Germany before, and now after the war ends up in Poland. And this is just another map, because it's, in terms of the geography, it's a very important location. Sorry, let me just make sure I've done what I wanted to do here. It's a very important location. You can see it's only about a 2.5-hour drive from Prague. It's about 2.5 hours to the German border as well. It's about an hour to Wrocław. So it is, and of course, that's part of why various invading armies and various other people have moved there. It's also, and this is something that comes up, it was on the death march from Auschwitz. A number of the Germans who lived there saw the death march going through, and that's a part of the testimonies that they've given. Right, okay. And I mean, the other point about its history is that it was a prime place for industry. It's on a river. It had early train power. It's near the coal fields. So it was the ideal place for the major industrial revolution, which happened at the end of the 19th century in what was Germany. It also turned out to be a place that you could, because there are mountains around, train people and then surreptitiously take them to Palestine to fight the War of Independence, because the communists hoped that the new Israel would be part of the Eastern Bloc. I just wanted to show you a picture of the town. If you have a look on top, you can still see the very medieval layout to the town. And there are indeed walls around quite a lot of the main city. The synagogue is here. You can't really see it very well in this picture. You see the very German design. There's the town square. And there are a couple of churches. One would have been Catholic and the other one would have been Protestant in the German time. They're obviously both Catholic churches now, and there is one synagogue. It suffered very little war damage, which is another issue about it. I've put this little picture in at the bottom. It's not a very good picture, but the town is in a valley surrounded by mountains. And when you come off the mountain in the evening, which I think this picture is taken, and you see the town in the valley, and you see the churches, steeples, and the town hall, it's an absolutely, beautiful view. This one isn't as good as my memory of it, but I just thought it would give you a feel for the town. And this is a map, obviously it's made in 2010, so it's not really that old, but it just kind of gives you a feel. There's a synagogue. This is the right way around. On the right-hand side, the 2 main churches and the town square. But it still has very much that form and that look. And of course, you can see Pope John Paul II, the Polish Pope, there as a sculpture. Right. So this is a picture of the town at the end of the beginning of the 20th century. And you'll see at the end, this church and this townscape is pretty much the way it is now. It hasn't changed very much. And the synagogue is here on the left-hand side, and it still is pretty much in its original form. It has a bit less land around it. Interestingly enough, the date on the synagogue was changed to 1957. It was actually built in 1875. So that's part of the way that nobody actually appreciated there was ever a Jewish population before the war. And I just was going to tell you a little bit about the industrial past. So I like the way in this, this is my great-grandfather's mill, but I love the way that they show the smoke, which I guess shows that, you know, it's working strongly. Now, I think we wouldn't show smoke in a picture. And that's my grandfather, this young man, my great-grandfather, this young man here. And the business, the Kaminsky business is one of the many Jewish businesses. The majority of people in the town, of Jews in the town, were either technicians or owners of shops or owners of factories, as is my father. The area around Jejonov is the area, it is of course part of the original Industrial Revolution. My grandmother wrote that she believed that her father's mill was the second oldest mill on the British model in the Industrial Revolution built in Germany. And the play by Gerhard Hauptmann, who won the Nobel Prize, wrote in 1892 a play called The Weavers, which was very much about textile workers in the sort of coming up to the industrial age, just before the beginning of industrialization. There were 3 German Jewish large mills in the town, but there were also other mills of many sizes, as there were in Britain in the Industrial Revolution. And here are just some pictures. This is Susie Klein, this little girl, and you see her here in the Catholic school she went to. We're looking at 1937 here. And her class at school. This is my father. And I think this is my guess. This was taken just after his bar mitzvah. He may have got this camera for his bar mitzvah. And this picture does not have him in it. There was a camp for young Jewish children. This is obviously the boys' camp in the town. And I think that that's what this is a picture of. Okay. And just to say one more thing about the picture, we're going to come back to, Susie did not keep this picture. This picture was given to her by some German women who found her many years later, which I'll tell you about. So in addition to everything else that it had, Reichenbach actually also had a concentration camp. It was part of Gross Rosen. It was one of the subcamps of Gross Rosen. It actually opened in 1940 and was one of the sites that took some of the original Jews from the town who were moved out. Although from the, I have one testimony whose aunt and grandmother was taken from the town, and they went to a house in what Wrocław, or what was called Breslau then, before they were moved in 1945 and killed. Not 1943, 42, and then eventually killed. The concentration camp in 1942 became a forced labor camp, and then in 1944, it became part of Gross Rosen. This is, I found yesterday, the day before, this is from Google Maps. You'll see the camp is still there, and you'll see up here that there are still people living there. I think they may be travelers, but we don't know anymore, but you can see there's electricity in the camp. The picture on the right is the monument, the memorial to those who died in the camp, and I believe that's the mayor. This was taken at Holocaust Memorial Day this year. I was told there is something like 20,000 people buried there, but I don't know. I don't know whether that's based on Gross Rosen figures or whether that's just somebody's estimate. But this monument here at the base was very interesting to us when we went to see it, because it's in Dutch. and no one in Jejunov knew why it was in Dutch or what it was. But fortunately for me, I have a cousin who was in a concentration camp in Holland. And she, when I told her about this, she said, I will find him for you. I will find out who sorted out this camp. And she did. And the man who had it built, his father and his brother died in the camp. His brother is this person here. He was a diarrheast. So we have his story, although of course he didn't survive the camp. I obviously we have Max's story. It was quite interesting because it was a bit of a Schindler's List style story. In Westerbork, which was a concentration camp in Holland, the Philips factory built a factory which Jews worked in. And he managed to save 340 odd Jews in the factory, but 150 were transported to Auschwitz, of which Max and his brother and father were taken. But because they had skills in the communications radio industry, they were moved and worked in as slave laborers in Jejunov. So that's why he survived. He became, I don't know if it was on retirement or before that, he also became an artist, although he was an economist by trade. And the what is it called? The USC Shoah database based in Southern California has thousands of people, of course, who've given visual testimony, but they have 150 who at one time or another was in this camp. So I had a look at some of them. I knew that some of the original Jews who went to live in Jejunov had come from the camp, and that they would have been the Polish Jews because the others were moved to other places. And so I found Ari here. Ari, of course, has a story of being in many camps and horrific experiences, but one of his, amazingly, both he and his two brothers survived the camps. The camp in Reichenbach was the easiest because they actually wanted their labor, so it was not quite as horrific as the other places which he survived. And indeed, they were encouraged by the Soviets who, they never had a long walk. They were liberated when the Soviets arrived. They encouraged them to come and live in Jejunov. They told them there are free houses, the Germans have left, you can have a house, you can have a job, you can have a good life. And the three of them went, and his two brothers actually, I don't know for how long, but they stayed in Jejunov, they married in Jejunov, and they were there for a period of time. Ari didn't marry. He went around looking for other relatives in Poland, which of course he couldn't find, went eventually to Israel and fought in the war, and then went to America. This is his wider family. I found his son, who is an Orthodox Jew in New York. This is a picture of him with his son and his grandson. I'm trying to find out more about his brothers to find out how long they actually stayed, but I haven't been able to do that. So you can see he, in the end, lived a much better life, but we have his story up. Unfortunately, the story that's in the Shoah only really takes him to the end of the war. And then I want to tell you a little bit about the Germans who were there. Let me find where I am. Just a minute. First of all, the pictures. When some of the Germans left, and Christopher was one of those, before the end of the war. So the businesses, as the Russians approached, his father's business, his father was in the army, but his father's business took his mother and him out surreptitiously at night under canvas in a truck with others from the factory. But most of the ones who left from what was then became Jejunov after the war were allowed to take one, this looks like a more generous one than any of them described to us, a cart with a few things in it, a bit of food and some pots and pans, as you can see. And that was it. The Jews who came in, of course, they had very different experiences, but the ones who got nice houses said they moved in and it looked like the person had just gone out for a walk or had left the dinner on the table. There was china. One of the women I met in New York still had the china from the German family who had left when they did. Others said it was wonderful. Their mother used to tell them to go down to the coal cellar to get coal, and they would find little, objects and gold coins and all kinds of things because people left in a hurry. What I found very interesting about it is not really more about the Jewish accounts, that they, in many cases, moved in with the German whose house it was to begin with. So there was a family who were told that they would get a bakery. They were not bakers. They knew nothing about baking, but the German baker was there. He continued to bake the bread and taught them how to do it for about 6 months, and then he was told to go, and they carried on with the bakery. A similar thing with a dentist. This dentist was moved into a dental surgery where there was of course she knew how to be a dentist, but where there was a German dentist, and the two of them worked together for a while, and then he was told to leave. They got most of the house. He had one room with his family. And I think what was interesting is there was probably enough contrition or realization that nobody seemed to argue about this. The Germans seemed to accept that this is what was happening. This woman is one of the ones who gave testimony to seeing the death march and trying to give bread to some of the people on the march, and was told that if she'd been older, she would have been killed because she gave them bread. This woman is someone who knew Susie Klein at the Catholic school, and it seems that for a lot of her life, it troubled her that she didn't know what had happened to Susie, and her grandson finally found Susie on the internet, and they had a phone call together. Susie has no memory of anything that happened before Kristallnacht, but from this woman's testimony, it's very clear that she did know Susie. There were about, I think at one time, about a couple of handfuls of Germans who didn't leave. This woman is one of them. She was one of two that was still alive when we did the interviews. And they had a very sad story. Her mother was waiting for her father to return from the war. He never did. He wasn't dead. He just decided to check up with another woman and never come home. He was found by her son some years later, and she refused to ever see him or meet him. This little park here, I don't know what this sign says. This little park here is actually a German graveyard. And some of the Jewish testimonies tell of remembering it when they went to school, when they would go out for a cigarette during lunchtime, and there would be human bones scattered around, and they would be kicking them around. It's now kind of a parkland, but you can see that none of the monuments from the German graveyard have survived. There's one, I think it's a mausoleum. This little red building here is actually the cultural center. I don't know whether it's built on the graveyard or not, but it's a beautiful building, and we've been offered space to have the exhibition in that center. By the way, the Jewish graveyard survived and is in good condition. So just to go through what happened in terms of migration, the Polish Jews started arriving in 46. The reports are that the first ones were Orthodox Jews, but it's not really clear where they came from, and they seem to have disappeared. I mean, most of the Jews there were not Orthodox. Very few of them went to the synagogue. They all went to get the matzah that was given free from the American Jewish Charities, and there were holiday camps, and there was, I'm going to talk about it a little later, a cultural center for Jews, which was very well attended. The Jews that came, obviously the first ones were from the concentration camp, and then there were ones that were hiding in guerrilla bands. there were a number of those that we've interviewed with amazing stories of what happened. And then there were some who came back from either Eastern areas, well, of the areas in Soviet Union. The ones that came, the early ones from the Soviet Union were, of course, Poles that had escaped east, and that's how they survived. And it seems that the ones who got as far, who went to Siberia, who were sent by the Russians to Siberia because they weren't good enough communists, seem to have done better than the others because they were further from the front line. And then later on, there were other Jews that came from Russia who appear to have been very poor. But again, we haven't interviewed any of those. I don't know very much about those. And then there were the departures. There were some early departures in 46 to 48 after the pogrom, but also of young Jews going to Palestine, being trained and going to Palestine. I was hoping Leah might be able to find some of those, but so far she didn't interview any of those people, so we don't know what happened to them. Then after Stalin's death, there was the largest group went. More than 50% of the Jewish population left at that point. And as the first lot went, there was more anti-Semitism, and probably another third went in a sort of during that period from 56 to 58. And the ones that remained were primarily ones that had good businesses and didn't want to go, were communists, didn't want to go, didn't identify as being Jewish. But what Betzalel told me is that certainly the first Jews to go were Jews who had been sitting on their suitcases through the whole period. And so that was part of why they went as soon as they could. The ones who left in 68 really didn't want to go. And I'll tell you a little bit about those stories later. Of course, many of the Jews came because when you got a large number of Jews and it was known as a Jewish town, it felt a comfortable place to go. So when they went back to the towns they came from, and it was clearly impossible for them to stay there and there were no relatives there, then the best place to go was Jejunov. These are just some early pictures. I really don't know very much about them, of the Jews who were there to begin with. Just going to get. I told you already about the matzah that was given out for Passover, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the social club. But a lot of the Jews we interviewed talked about their fathers going out in the evening and walking around the town hall in this big square, I guess all in the same direction every evening, talking politics. And I can just imagine these groups of people out walking around.
Ruth, we have another some minutes, and
okay, we're getting there. I'll go quickly. So obviously the Communist Party was in power there, and here are some pictures. There was an orphanage, and I like the fact that there's wonderful smiling Soviet officers there. This is a man who was very active in the early Soviet politics, and the two Jews below are people who stayed in Jejunov. I mean, Bella was alive when we interviewed her. I don't know whether she still is, and Jakubowicz is not anymore, but he stayed there until his death. This is Betzalel, and of course, he was one of the first part of the group that left for Israel. I believe he's the younger child here. And I just wanted to say something else. Almost all of them told us about having taking things with them. They couldn't take money, but they could take objects that they hoped they could sell. And Betzalel's family took this accordion, which they never were able to sell, but is still with him to this day.
I have the same accordion which my parents brought from Wroclaw in 1957.
Did they play it, or did they just bring it?
No, nobody played, and I have it still at my home.
That's right. And people also brought things like fridges that turned out not to be able to work because the power was different. So people, I think the bicycles were the thing people brought that actually worked. This is the Jewish school, and this is Betzalel, and this is him more recently, of course. And there were scouts as well. People were scouts, and there were, of course, lots of different political organizations, Zionist ones, both left Zionists, right Zionists, communist ones, non-Zionist ones. It was full of different groups. And this is the Jewish social club called Teskazeh. And it was, of course, a communist-inspired club, but had wonderful activities. Everyone describes it. There were newspapers in Yiddish. There was a famous Yiddish singer. In fact, I interviewed her daughter, and she was alive, but she didn't want to be interviewed. And there was a real exciting life for those people who were there. This is before 56. Oh, just one other story is about when Stalin died. And a bit like I think of, well, when I remember when Kennedy died, they all remember when Stalin died. And one girl came home crying. She was in tears. Her mother said, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?" And she said, "Stalin died." And her mother said, "Thank God." And that was the first time she realized there was an issue with Stalin. Oh, I've lost a picture. It's all right. We'll carry on. This was about Jews who left in 68. Most of them didn't want to leave. 2 of them have disappeared here. They actually had an easier time to leave, but they found it extremely stressful. They were at university. They were halfway through their degrees. They had their life planned out, and they were forced to go. Lena was a little different. Lena, her parents didn't want to go because they had a good business. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in her school. And she said, when I turn 18, either I'm going to Israel on my own or we're leaving. They actually went to Denmark. Just to show you a little bit of the business, the Diora factory, very important. But again, its history is fascinating. It was the Kohn textile mill, which was, of course, taken from them before Kristallnacht, actually, became a Nazi communications factory, which is where the people in some of the people in the concentration camp worked, and then became the main communications radio television factory in Poland. But if you read the Polish literature, because there was an anniversary, it said it was nothing before the Poles came, but clearly it already had a communications
And we have to finish, Ruth.
Yeah, okay. With
more questions.
Okay, there were Macedonians as well, and and Greeks. I haven't found any Greeks. I found some Macedonians. I just thought this was funny because, of course, we're now in COVID, so the Macedonian interviews were done with face coverings. And then there were people in the Solidarity movement, which I can talk about another time. I want in the project to talk about where people are and what was lost by the town in talent and culture. And the real messages are about immigration and refugees and how important, this isn't new. All of the people who live in the town were refugees at one time. I want to talk about the multicultural history, the birthplace of industry, and the trauma experienced. And it's very important. The people who gave their interviews often didn't talk about it, but they now want to talk about those experiences. Just a picture of the synagogue as it is more recently, the town as it is more recently. This is from the synagogue. And the exhibition, which we hope to launch with history and sound, would like to use the old radios and a website and a book. And we hope to have the exhibition in Jejona. We have a place in Görlitz, which is a Silesia museum. And of course, Leah has offered very kindly her center potentially for an exhibition. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ruth. And questions, but before there was a question, Natalia asked about how was she still in a Catholic school in 1937?
She was there until Kristallnacht.
Until Kristallnacht, but how come it
was a primary school? It is true that my father, he was at secondary school and he couldn't. He went to a Jewish school in Breslau, but I guess the primary schools allowed it. But she was there until Kristallnacht.
Okay. Questions? Bezalel, would you like?
Yes. Yes, my name was mentioned for several times. And what Ruth told you was a part of my study of the history of the Jews in the city, in the town. And I finished my study, which resulted in an essay which covered 150 years of the Jews in Reichenbach and Dzierżoniów, since 1816 till 1968. It was published by the Polish Museum portal Shtetl as an essay which covers the both eras, the German and the Polish, by the Wiener Library in London. And a separate article of the Polish era was published by the Jewish History Quarterly, Kwartalnik Historii Żydów, Czerwiec 2017. So the study which covers Dzierżoniów, what Ruth was talking about, is found today on the internet, of the Shtetl.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questions? It's really fascinating, very interesting, and this is a base for other researchers in the area of Silesia. My family lived in Wrocław, and we have here also Olympia, she's from Bystrzyca Kłodzka, which is not far away from Dzierżoniów, and I'm sure it is a good base to continue to learn this subject and to research this subject, and even in schools. Olympia, you are with us? Olympia?
Yes, I'm here. I'm listening.
Yes, Olympia, I know that you talked, when we talked, you talked about Gross Rosen, yes, and now in school, maybe with our school, we can do a program together to make research about your city and the area and interview people.
I think it will be very interesting. Few days ago, I have sent a picture for you. It's a memorial from the synagogue of Kłodzko. So there is always also a Jewish cemetery in Kłodzko. But I have no access in there, so I couldn't take a picture. I think it's really huge space for doing some research here.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes, Olympia, you and I spoke some time ago before COVID.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
I've read those testimonies that you sent me. It was very, very touching.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges for me is to look at how to put it together, because there's so much material in a way that is accessible to people.
Okay.
2 points, please.
Yes, Gil.
Thank you very much. I couldn't change my name to English, so my name is Gil Faran. 2 points. My family, when they returned from the East, they got a bakery in a nearby town. After, in the post-war, today it's called Gushitze, then it called for 1 year Gashtopushte. It's about 30 kilometers to the west. This is the small part, but in June 2019, when you remembered we had the privilege to go abroad, the Polish Institute organized us a seminar in the Wrocław area, and we had the privilege to visit the synagogue. A group of Israeli guides into Poland, about 16, something like this. We visit a few hours in this kind of shtetl. The synagogue now is a kind of museum. Very nice couple that remained the Jewish history in the synagogue. It's very, the synagogue was very well renovated, very nice place to visit, but it's far away from our traditional roots to Poland.
Yes, yes. I have someone also who had who got a bakery in Silesia. So it'd be interesting. I could even send you that because it's fascinating how they. In fact, what happened was the Russian soldiers didn't just want bread. They didn't particularly want bread. They wanted vodka. So they went to the bakery and they said, "Can you give us vodka?" He says, "No, I'm a bakery. I don't have vodka." And they said, "Well, if you want to sell bread, you need to sell vodka," because they wanted to pay for it and say they were getting bread. And so they had a good business. They sold vodka.
This is what is great in this forum. We connect people, you know, to work together, to write together.
Yeah.
And to end this session, because time is running, I would like to read. Krzysztof Chubachek, you are here with us, yes? So I will read what you wrote. Also, a group of Jewish survivors from Wukov stayed after World War II in Reichenbach, Georgiev. Then most of them immigrated to Israel and other countries. As you remember, I talked about the Jews of Wukov during the last meeting of the Poland Forum. Yes, last meeting was about Georgiev. Veronica, good to see you. Veronica, good to see you. Okay, if
May we ask short questions?
yes, yeah. Welcome.
It's very interesting what you did, but I just wanted to ask you if you used also material like from archives or diaries, memoirs, also from German refugees in Germany, because if we speak about this experience of being refugees, so you could meet this. Jewish refugees and interview and speak about them with them. Polish that came from the east, Jews that came from the east. But what about Germans who went away? Maybe this could also enrich your research and
we interviewed 11
perspective.
We interviewed 11 Germans who had lived there before the war.
But not in Dzierżoniów, but elsewhere.
Well, there's just 11. I mean, we've done 11 who lived in Dzierżoniów. In other words, they were Germans who had lived in Reichenbach when it was part of Germany, and they now live in Germany. So we did interview 11 of them, which was kind of we were kind of going for 10 from each one of the different groups. So we didn't look at diaries, but we did interview them. But I mean, they're not a representative sample. They're people who we found, if you see what I mean. So they were people who were prepared to be interviewed.
So this is again a good reason to work together to find. And Veronica, yes, you wanted to say something, yes?
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation, Ruth. I was, by the way, I was in Dzierżoniów and I was very much impressed by the also atmosphere of the city, and I was also introduced to the synagogue and activists all around the place. And actually, I have a question to you about because I was also working at the Department of Jewish Studies at the University of Wrocław.
Yeah.
And I know that there are many. Did you were in touch? Maybe have you been in touch with people from?
Well, I know Camille, and in fact, I had a student working for me. You know, people do a placement in their summer, who is from Martina. I can't think of her last name at the moment. Who did some interviews in the summer. It was obviously difficult because of COVID, but she interviewed a few neighbors and. She took some of my interviews that were in Polish and translated them. So I have worked with those two people from there. And obviously I've seen Camille's articles.
Yes, so that's great to hear that you cooperate already, because I think that there are many more people even that may be interested and may give some input to.
Absolutely. I mean, the difficulty is finding them, and admittedly, because I don't speak the language, it's very difficult. And the woman who's been cooperating in Dzierżoniów, who is now head of social care and education. And so you can imagine how her time is stretched. So she really hasn't been able to do very much at the moment. But I have a friend in London who is Polish, who is advertising on Facebook as well as other places to get Poles who have who either live there now or have lived there. So we're also looking at Poles who've left for one reason or another. We have one who's left because of communism. He was a DJ, played the Beatles, I believe, and had to leave, and a number of other people. But I think we've kind of come to, we're trying, Carol, I was hoping maybe you can help. We're now kind of trying to think about how to curate the information, because what we really, our real purpose isn't so much as it's not an academic piece of research. It's about enabling people who live there and other people to get a feeling for the multicultural history that existed, and to not be afraid of multicultural, environments, which of course in Poland, at the moment is a very difficult thing.
Thank you for sharing more details about actually how do you do your research, because that was also my question about the final outcome of your project. Will it be a book or?
Yeah, well, I'd like it. I think of course it can go on a website, and it could go in a book at a cost. The challenge now is I have been taking all of the interviews, and they've been translated into English, and then making them into 2,000 word stories, oral histories. But the challenge is that they need to be in Polish, German, Hebrew, in order to actually be accessed by people. And you can't really stand in a museum and read the histories anyway. So there has to be a way of doing it. I do have a collaborator who is a sound he kind of does sound orchestration. And the idea would be to use the radios and maybe have some kind of cacophony of languages and voices, because the people who lived in Jejonov now speak maybe something like 10, 15 different languages. Some went to South America, some live in other parts of in North Macedonia, they speak Macedonian. So there's a lot of potential to make it quite exciting, but there's a cost involved, which we don't have,
And one last question from my side about you answered it a little bit already, but how did you find your interviewees? Was it the work that the research that was done by the helpers of yours in the project? How did you, was it the snowball method?
There's an organization of Germans who lived in Jejonov before the war, Reichenbach, and we got some names from that. The woman Susie, the one she lived in the synagogue, actually, I showed you a little picture of her. She knew some Germans found her, and one of those was interviewed. One man wrote to Bezalel, and he then was interviewed. And so it was a combination, and the Polish ones have proved the most difficult, actually, because the students didn't understand what we wanted. So they interviewed important people who hadn't necessarily had any history of migration, or, so we're still looking for some of those, but we have 3 or 4 really good Polish stories from Poles, and we're looking for a few more. And, kind of by hard work, I didn't know there was anyone in Scandinavia, and I went to a talk and I discovered that Jews had gone to Scandinavia in '68, and I phoned someone who phoned someone who phoned someone, and that person knew people in New York. He had a big Facebook site, and so I found people in New York and other places. So it's really just, I guess you could say, hard graft, but amazing. The only place I haven't found anyone is in Greece, because they're very anti people who live in the north of Greece, who might have been Macedonian. They don't like the word Macedonian. So it's still very contentious politically. To be honest, I'd love to be able to interview some of the gypsies, some of the travelers who are clearly still living there. But I think that would be politically too difficult, both for them and for the city. And people who are gay. There are lots of groups, outsiders, you might say, that it would be good to interview. One of the people who was Susie's friend, who didn't want to be interviewed, but I knew from Susie, was born out of wedlock. I mean, so she was already an outsider. That may have been why they were friends at school. You know, they were very.
Sorry, the clock. We have only 2 minutes to finish.
Okay. Anyway, so I mean, but it's about how you tell those stories. So I'd love, Carol, if you have time, as maybe curator, to look at how we pull it together, because we have the material, but it's about making it into something that works.
Okay, this is really a great idea that Judy initiated the forum, and we really can do.
You initiated it.
And it was really very interesting. I would like to thank you, Ruth, and all of you for participating and giving your time. I know that everyone is so busy, but it gives us lots of material for thinking, and how we continue cooperating. We can correspond by emails and continue. And our next meeting will be on March with Gil. And I will update you, of course, send you emails as usual, and the link for the Zoom. And I wish you all lots of health.
Just to say, if anybody wants more or would like to work with me, I felt like I was a bit like the Wizard of Oz. I would find someone and I would grab them, and I'd love it if anybody else is interested in the project to work with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a lovely evening and take care. Lots of health.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.